Thank you, Officer Ontiveros. The time is 6 o'clock, and we have the presence of a quorum, and this meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been given in the time and manner required by law. Our first item is the pledges of allegiance, and these ladies will lead us in the pledges of allegiance. If you'll please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now for the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Now, if you'll please remain standing for the silent invocation. You may be seated. Thank you all for being here tonight. Our first item of business are the recognitions. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, Mrs. James, if the board would join me in front of the dais, we have some outstanding students and staff to recognize this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. We're proud to recognize two students from McAuliffe Middle School who led the pledges of allegiance tonight. Anahi Sanchez. Anahi is the student council president, and she's also a talented student athlete. While participating in athletics, she is enrolled in pre-AP classes and is consistently on the AB honor row. Ebony Walker is the student council vice president, and she too is a student athlete role model on campus. She strives for academic excellence with determination, drive, and focus. Please help us recognize and congratulate Anai Sanchez and Ebony Walker. Tonight we are proud to recognize the Ridgepoint High School swimmers who placed first and third in the state swimming championship in February, which is held at the University of Texas Swim Center in Austin. Carly Wood, Kylie Powers, Abby Wong, and Kennedy Thaman make up the 200 medley relay team that placed third. Kennedy Thaman placed third in the 50-yard freestyle, and Kylie Powers is the state champion in the 100-yard breaststroke. Please help us recognize Carly Wood, Kylie Powers, Abby Wong, Kennedy Thaman, and their swim coach, Stephen Fall. Now I would like to turn the recognitions over to Mr. Madden for the Student Leadership 101 program recognitions.
Tonight we are proud to recognize the students who form the junior level service cohort of the Student Leadership 101 program. The purpose of the Student Leadership program is to support the Board of Trustees' community engagement agenda by providing district junior and senior level high school students with opportunities to demonstrate leadership and become involved in volunteer service. As such, the board has helped these students become partners for positive change in Fort Bend County. This year, these talented and committed students have traveled throughout Fort Bend County, meeting the people who lead and shape the future of our community. The students have had the opportunity to explore and learn about themselves as leaders, and some have even taken that first step to begin their journey as leaders. Please help us recognize and congratulate the Student Leadership 101 cohort. First, from Austin High School. Lauren Byrne. Kim D. Okafor. And Quinn Westfall. Next, from Bush High School, we have Marla Montoya, Juliet Ogu, who is absent and could not be with us this morning or this afternoon, and Cindy Tejada. From Clements High School, we have Rafael Chamet, Ziba Parani, and Kylie Ting. From Dulles High School, we have Shruti Avanza, Ashley Song, and Liang Zhao. From Elkins High School, Joyce Chin, who cannot be with us this evening, Peyton Hoover, Prakul Suresh. From Hightower High School, Zayan Ali, who cannot be with us this evening, Ebi Aweri, Josh Pitakali, who was also unable to attend, and Ann Johnson from Kempner High School, Priya Pai, and Yalu Sivaprakash. From Marshall High School, we have Jason LeBlanc, David Opatati, and Esmeralda Rodriguez. From Rich Point High School, we have Alexandra Alberti, Morgan Cox, and Ariel Smith. From Travis High School, we have Abir Dahani, Jesus Fonseca, and Mira Senka Havaram. And from Willow Ridge High School, we have Bria Castillo, Geraldine Dumas, and Taylor Frazier.
On behalf of the student leadership cohort of 2014 and 2015, we'd like to give you this as a token of our gratitude.
All right, well, thank you, students. That was very nice. Our next item of business is our audience items. If students and so forth would like to leave, that's fine. You're welcome to exit at this time. If you are a speaker for tonight, you're next up. So the speakers tonight have 3 minutes to speak. Mrs. Bailey will be timing you. When you have 30 seconds remaining, she will let you know, and so you can wrap up your remarks. Our first speaker tonight is Ms. Mitchell.
Good evening. My name is Frances Kate Mitchell. I'm an ELA teacher at Kempner High School. I will not be addressing the grievance that I have pending before the board, but rather the district's handling of the grievance. I must say that the district handling of my grievance has been at times dismissive, unprofessional, and inept. And I'm particularly disturbed by the district's action in light of the mandated customer service training that all employees had about 3 years ago during the school year, as well as the professional norms that were introduced by the superintendent that I'm very excited about at the August convocation. I'd like to bring to the board's attention that most, if not all, of the Texas Education Agency's directives and oversight to this board, as well as similar Department of Education investigations and monitorings, had their beginnings with a complaint by a parent or a rank-and-file teacher that was ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Our next speaker tonight is Herman Burns.
Hello, everyone. My name is Herman Burns. I'm standing here before you today because I am guilty of holding a student accountable for his own actions. One major regret that I have is that I have failed him in teaching him that life lesson that I have taught so many others. And that lesson is that if you do something wrong, you need to own up to it and learn from it and move on. On the day in question, the student gave me his phone, because this is behind the student and the phone, because he knew he was going to get in trouble. During class period, I stepped out to speak to another student. When I came back into the classroom, the student was at my desk, rummaging through my desk and handing out different things. He stated that he wanted his phone back. I told him that he would get his phone back after lunch. He then began to get angry. I told him that if he continued his behavior, that he would have to wait until after school to receive his phone. He then approached me in a hug-like motion. I put my hands up to stop him and seized him by the arms and walked him backwards. He went away from my desk and sat down. He went away from my desk and I sat down. I called his mother, but she did not respond. He then went to the door and blocked it and said he was not leaving until he got his phone back. At that time, that's when he then stated that since I touched him, he was going to go to the principal and tell him that I touched him and that he was going to get me fired like the other coach. With that said, I told the student to go ahead and go do whatever you got to do because I did nothing wrong. I blocked him from trying to come at me. The issue, well, I'm not going to go there. I would just like to say that I've taught at Bush High School for 12 years. Almost 12. This is my 11th year, about to be 12, hopefully, if this goes well. I love the school that I work at. I love my coworkers and the students. I was the AVID coordinator for 8 years, the English department head for probably about 7 or 8. And for the most part, I have been put on this earth to educate kids. That's what I do. I'm good at it. And not only children, but grown people. Because under my direction, I've helped grown people become better teachers.
30 seconds.
Yes, ma'am. But in closing, for the most part, I would like to say that I know I've positively impacted a lot of people. And I would love to continue to impact these individuals at the school that I'm at. Not only have I been there, but I'm also a product of Fort Bend, graduating at Kempner. I have no desire to go anywhere except teach there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Our next speaker is Deborah Coleman. You need to come to this one, please.
Hi, my name is Deborah Coleman, and I'm a teacher at Bush High School. Thank you, Board and Dr. Dupree, for allowing me to make this statement on behalf of my colleague, Herman Burns. I have known Herman Burns for over 10 years, first as an associate and later as a friend and colleague. He has been my department chair for over 5 years, until recently when he was asked to leave our school for allegedly harming a student in self-defense. Although I do not know the details of the allegations, several student witnesses have come forward in Mr. Burns' actions in this matter in his defense. That particular student is among many who have taunted and or threatened teachers lately at Bush High School in their efforts to get another teacher or get their current teacher terminated. There are several and numerous videos on YouTube that instruct students in just how to do that, to accomplish that, get rid of their teacher. In Mr. Burns' defense, I myself have witnessed him in the past interacting with difficult students, and I can attest to the fact that he would never harm a child intentionally or unintentionally, and has demonstrated emotional and physical control in interacting with children. Prior to teaching, Mr. Burns had the experience of working as a correction officer. He was no doubt trained to subdue an individual should they become a physical threat to himself or another student, but I have never seen nor ever heard of him using those skills with difficult, belligerent, or aggressive students. In conversations with him, I have come to surmise he became a teacher to do what he could to help prevent students from, especially at-risk students, from ending up in a place where he used to work. As a department chair, Mr. Burns has been instrumental in helping his colleagues grow and shine as educators. He appreciates the various and unique talents we each bring to the workplace and to help our students excel. Every year since he has become a department chair, one or two of his teachers has either been Teacher of the Year nominee or Teacher of the Year winner. He himself has been a Teacher of the Year, and in my case, I was not only a Teacher of the Year, but a district finalist. That was 2012, 2011, 2012 school year. He has been sorely missed by his colleagues and his students, and many of whom are afraid to come forward in fear of retaliation by our current administration or even the students, who's known to intimidate and subdue anyone who disagrees or speaks out in opposition. Currently, I have gone on record saying just that via chat with Charles and through formal grievance. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Jessica Hernandez.
I'm short. Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Hernandez, and I am alumni of George Bush High School, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Mr. Herman Burns. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Burns in 2006 during my high school sophomore year. He became my avid teacher and mentor. This was the first year Bush High School was participating in a class solely based on preparing students for college, and they could not have placed a better primary leader. Unlike other classes based only on required material, Mr. Burns' class allowed us to critically think about our choices, ourselves, our future, and our dreams. Having a mentor who actually cared about why homework wasn't done instead of just giving us a failing grade really made us try to succeed. Since he was our teacher for 3 years, he quickly came to learn our strengths, our weaknesses, our families, and our struggles. This allowed him to connect with his students and really try to help them in every way possible. He believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. In the beginning of my senior year, I started surrounding myself with the wrong crowd. I put myself in multiple situations that were either dangerous or could have negatively affected the rest of my life. I specifically remember one afternoon when Mr. Burns asked my best friend and myself to stay after class. My friend knew I needed help, and Mr. Burns was the only person I respected enough to talk some sense into me. The moment I realized he knew of my recent mistakes, I began crying and broke down completely. I had disappointed the one person who believed in me. Sorry. With his constant support and guidance, I started focusing on school again. I went from a girl who didn't even think college was possible to a young lady filling out college applications and college scholarships. He kept in constant contact with my teachers and my instructors to ensure I was putting in my 100%. Unlike other teachers, he noticed and spoke with students when they felt overwhelmed. I'm proud to say I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science degree from Stephen F. Austin State University in May of 2014. I credit Mr. Burns entirely with my success. Although I do have loving parents, they did not attend college and had no clue how to apply for one. Secondly, most teenagers don't feel comfortable enough talking to their parents about certain issues. Mr. Burns was always available with a listening ear and words that we needed to hear. It's been 6 years since I graduated Bush, and I feel honored to still keep in contact with Mr. Burns. He's still my mentor and my life teacher. I emailed him when I was thinking about joining a service sorority, and he replied with concerns about Greek life and time management. I contacted him about my internship's acceptance, and he replied with encouraging words. I emailed him about my recent life struggles, and he responded with caring words of advice. Mr. Herman Burns has made a positive impact on my life, on my classmates' lives, and hopefully future students to come. It would be heartbreaking to see my mentor's life impacted negatively. He is highly respected and loved by many current and student
30
and alumni,
seconds.
and I look forward to continuing to watch him shine at his passion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That concludes our audience items for this evening. Our next item of business is our information items. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, ma'am. Our first information item this evening is our annual demographic update. We have PASA here with us this evening, and they're going to present in conjunction with staff. I'm not sure, Max, are you going to introduce that?
Each year, we update our facilities master plan with new demographic updates so that we can triangulate the data and make sure that the course that we had set is still the course we need to pursue. And so tonight, Dr. Stacy Tapera and Dr. Pat Guzman will present the demographic update for this current year.
Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and hope that we can provide some useful data, especially in terms of revised information about new master plan communities and subdivisions, as well as the way that these existing subdivisions, the over 500 that are built out, are changing, regenerating, and creating new students as well. That's true. Okay. Okay. Okay, thanks. We neglected to say we are from Texas A&M. There were 3 options here for us, about too many. We are interested, first and foremost, in how each of the districts that we would consider comparable or have been growing this year. And it has been a fascinating year in that 9 of the 10 highest growth districts, those increasing with the greatest number of added students, are in the Houston area. That will never happen again in our lifetime. So it's been an interesting situation to observe out of approximately 1,025 districts in the state. So you can see here that Katy and Houston were leaders. Katy with about 85% of its growth due to new housing. Houston ISD more due to immigration and then students returning to what had been the North Forest catchment area. So here, if we move to the 5-year trends, again, it's very similar and interesting to see that Fort Bend ISD increased by 3,400 students over the 5-year period, with needs to accommodate those students at every grade level. If we look at the past growth rates, as we know in the earlier boom period, most of which is excluded from this slide, we know that that's when you had the highest percent increase. In fact, there were 2 earlier boom periods, one in the 80s as well. Now, this year there was about a 1.7% increase, but that data is deceiving in that, of course, the growth was heavily oriented to the western part of the school district. Also of interest by grade is the bulges that are formed in kindergarten and first grade. If we have a high percent increase in those grades, those students don't disappear. We continue to see them in every ensuing grade. So you see last year the 4% increase in kindergarten, this year the 3.34% increase in first grade students. And of course those are critical bulges to evaluate and watch. Now this district is really unique in terms of socioeconomics. For example, it's a very highly educated population. There are 62 school districts in the metro area. This district ranks second in terms of the educational levels of the population 25 years and over. And other characteristics are equally interesting. The median income of this district is high. So it's a district that accommodates an upper socioeconomic cohort. And we continue to watch also travel times to work, because that plays a big role. Every minute counts in terms of going to and from work, and that is a pull to the district to have shorter travel times for among the suburban districts at least. Now, in comparing the districts statewide, the 60 that have the largest enrollments are of particular interest, and we see here that Fort Bend ISD has a low proportion of economically disadvantaged students. Why do we have such an interest in this? It's so important because that is one of the two characteristics that developers, investors in undeveloped properties, and builders are seeking to watch and observe trends in the disadvantaged student population as well as in test results. This is one example, grades 3 through 8 in Fort Bend. Again, it's an important characteristic, and the district ranks high relative to those 60 districts of 20,000 plus students. Also, we have to determine the pull factors that might occur away from the district schools. We work with districts that have up to 17% of their student population in private and charter schools. So if you could wade through this list, which is in our report, and it is interesting to look at. The blue column represents the students from Fort Bend ISD as estimated by those administrators that we interviewed. So we now know that around 3,598 students are in those specific facilities and reside within the district. There are many other schools that have small numbers of students from the district, 1 to 5 or maybe 10 students, but these are those that were in close proximity or in transportation paths to major employment centers as well as in the district. You can see that we do anticipate a less than 1% increase over 5 years in private school enrollment, but it represents a very small proportion of the overall district growth. That's what we have looked at for the 5 years forward period, as well as taking into account any improvements that could be planned in terms of increasing capacities of these schools. So employment trends, I'm sure that we've all followed this closely, approximately since Thanksgiving Day, when oil price problems begin to affect the Houston area. But in looking at the data, we know that by sector of employment, this district is predominantly oriented to educational and medical services, and then a huge array of professional and managerial services, followed by retail trade. So if we look at Houston and the metro area as a whole, there are about 3 numbers that are bandied about for the added employment last year, but let's say approximately 120,000. It differs relative to the Texas Workforce Commission versus Greater Houston Partnership, but the Greater Houston Partnership is suggesting around 50 or 60,000 added jobs for 2016, much smaller for the Houston area as a whole. And starting in January, there were some significant losses that drilled into those gains and worked against the gains that had been made in 2014. But it is interesting that there are key employment generators within this district that are very diverse, and that will definitely be helpful in the next 2 to 3 years. Because we work with all of the high-growth districts in the Houston area, with the exception of Houston ISD, I think it's interesting to look back at the surveys that we did in the last two oil price downturns in Katy ISD. So basically, those two surveys are of interest because they show that while we had projected a fairly hefty growth per year for Katy for enrollment, that BP and other energy firms in the energy corridor within Katy and nearby basically explained they were going to be furloughing temporarily. They were going to be cutting the workforce back to half-time, half-days, and yet at the same time, they were going to be consolidating throughout the globe. And you know that, of course, is exactly what's happening now, a lot of consolidations. And then their newest office space, which tends to be in Houston, was the recipient of those consolidations. So ultimately, for Katy's last two downturns, in terms of the projections for the following year, they lost not a student, not a net student was lost. So how does that reflect on this downturn? It's not going to be the same because we've added a new dimension, and that is the huge glut of U.S. oil that we did not have before. And I don't see that we are expecting a decline in that production. So that being the case, I think we will be impacted. We will see school districts impacted. Mark Dotzer, Dr. Dotzer, with the Real Estate Center in College Station at A&M, has given one number. It may or may not prove accurate, but he has suggested around 20 to 30,000 homes, new homes, will be built in the Houston area over the next 12 months. Now that is interesting because that can reflect up to a 34% downturn in terms of the number of new housing units. And this district is interesting because in our modeling effort in projecting enrollment for next year, we've depended on new housing to explain 90% of the added students. So what does that mean for this district? It's so fascinating to think about the what-ifs, because if we had 1/3 fewer homes ultimately built in the next, say, 12 months, then right now we are projecting around 1,234 students to be added due to those new homes, and 10% due to the aging of the students that bring in more students and so forth. But 1,234 added students. So we can say if we lost 1/3 of those students, we would have around, and we had projected this, ironically, because we have a low scenario of growth as well as the most likely, thank goodness. And so with that projection, it was 926 students to be added total, and that would give us a loss roughly of 300 students. In a district of 72,142 students as of the PEAM snapshot, give or take 3 students, then that is 0.004 of a change. So in other words, we don't really expect to lose in the net students who live here now. And the big impact, we will lose some, but we will gain some for other reasons because you have diversity in terms of your employment centers. So we're concentrating on what's going to happen to the new housing. And that being the case, then you're going to be very little affected in terms of the overall growth. And I will move forward here quickly because I know your time is limited this evening, but I did want to emphasize that through 2014, new home starts accelerated. Fort Bend ranked third in terms of housing starts out of the 62 districts. And in Houston, I need to, I'm always giving Houston as a statistical outlier, I suppose, but Houston's added housing is heavily oriented to townhomes, condos. Those are single-family dwellings. And so that makes it a bit atypical. And Katie's development is interesting because unlike Fort Bend with its 9 master plan communities that are planned or actively building out, many of Katie's are building out. New development planned in the wetlands in the northwest in Katy. But if we look at those 3 districts, then Fort Bend is fairly unique in terms of the continued expectations for adding new dwellings. Apartment demand won't decelerate heavily, but apartments are going to be fewer. However, we expect 6 to be added by fall. They're either now being occupied or almost fully occupied or just about to start occupancies. 7 counting a senior housing development. So that's unique in this district because, this district has only 32 apartments right now that have students in them. And I believe 7 that are senior housing, so a small number of complexes. And then for the constant interest in existing subdivisions, those that are basically called built out, we continue to follow with 8 indicators the growth and declines of those. This year, there was just basically almost a 0 change. Some increased with students, and some are emptying out, empty nests. Then again, looking at the overall build-out of this district, it would be interesting to conjecture when the district will be built out, but right now it's 81% built out if, when you look at the rust-colored areas, you presume that they will never develop. And about 3 of those most likely will develop, including on the far right here, which is landfill, both in Katy and here is landfill elsewhere on the west side as well. Both in Katy, Cy-Fair, and several other districts, portions of landfills are now building out, so we can't exclude them. And then the other rust-colored areas are also interesting, Jester and the Central Prison parcel and so forth. So 81% built out. That's very, very interesting in terms of looking toward future demand for housing. Now, this shows the areas that had changed ownership over the past year, and you can see around Sienna Plantation and Harvest Green in particular, massive owner changes for residential development. And we follow this because we presume that speculation will yield a lot of single-family housing, so we can call the new landowners and talk with them about their plans. Now, these are the parcels for sale based on Comgate and CoStar, and then informally driving the district. And some of these have been in bank hands, like this area in here, and also the tollway's been buying up land in here. And this, interestingly, is right in the middle of the landfill and has no real interest right now. But it is important to follow these parcels that are for sale. So we mentioned that we are looking at the active subdivisions as adding 90% of the students next year. This year, they explain 96% of the added students to the district. And apartments explained 3%, townhomes 1%. But the built-out subdivisions, which are so critical to watch, basically made no impact at all. These show the developments that are going to have the greatest added housing units over the next 10 years in the blue column. So these are the ones that we'll watch closely. Some will build out pretty rapidly, like Fieldstone, for example. And then if we look at multifamily, again, keeping in mind that we can basically not easily project multifamily beyond the first 5 years with any certainty. But that's why we see half of the number being projected in the last 5 years of that 10-year projection period, because, you know, these are geo-referenced, and we'll be adding students based on a ratio of students per unit applied to every one of these. So we have to be very, very conservative unless we know with greater than 50% probability of their development. So now, in summarizing, looking at the projected new housing for next fall, we see that in the mustard color, that's Imperial and includes apartments, etc. The yellow on the far west is interesting, Grand Mission and Fieldstone, and the yellow along the Brazos River is predominantly Riverstone. And then if we look forward for 5 years, where we see red areas, we're looking again predominantly at the west as leading the demand for housing, but also Avalon in Riverstone, and then Sienna in Sienna Plantation in the south, and Imperial. And this shows us out in that 5-year period. That's the last 5 years of our 10-year projection period. And here we see that Memorial Plantation is expected to be developing right in here. And other developments that are right on the edge of the district. Of course, Shadow Creek has 3 sections still to build out. And this is a development owned by Dick Rue. He, I'm sure, will develop it with time and so forth. So we know that there's still development occurring, but it's especially, now this is the 10-year projection, and just follow the red and you'll know where there's a demand for schools, very simplistically based. And then this last map is showing post-2024. So we've projected out through the PEAM snapshot date of October 2024. Post that, then you also see some interesting demand, still Sienna building out in the south, and other multiple owners in the deep south still having over 1,400 acres. And then Hanover, that's Clint Wong, has a big parcel in here. And right here is the communications towers. But Missouri City has said that as McCard improves, that the demand will be mainly for commercial, but other development too, so we can't say that that area will never have residential development. And again, it is so interesting to look out to a build-out time frame. Overall, for the 10 years, around 35,000 housing units, multifamily and single-family projected. And you saw that they represented a hefty number there of multifamily units, so that about 30% of the projected added housing will be multifamily, very conservatively. And right now, though, only 8% of the housing is multifamily. So ratios of students per house. You know, we all think of the white picket fence and 2 children for every home. But remember, for the state as a whole, the average is about a 0.63 students per occupied home. And so there are the very young that own a house and have no children, the very old or the young old. And right now, the ratio is 0.58 in this district. And of course, some of that is due to the fact that some of these new subdivisions are attracting the very young that have no children yet. Apartments in huge demand in this district. The average for the state, it's hard to know because we don't work for the entire state, but it would be about a 0.27, maybe up to maybe a 0.32 as the ratio, but you have 0.43 students per occupied unit in this district. It's just fascinating, the high demand for apartments among families in this district. This shows you real briefly where students are packed in each house, and they are packing them in here for these subdivisions. High ratios. And then these are the very low, and many of these are patio homes and higher density, empty nest-oriented developments. Then projected student enrollment. Again, we anticipate under a conservative moderate growth scenario around 83,800 students in 10 years. So again, keeping in mind this year the 72,142 roughly for the PEAM snapshot. You can see what that increase will look like. And again, keep in mind that while this percent growth may seem fairly small, that if you look at every single school district in the state, you're about 7th or 8th out of every district this year in the state of Texas in growth and adding students. So that's a huge responsibility to be able to have the capacity to handle the added students each year. And we also have a high growth scenario which could easily occur under specific circumstances, and a low growth scenario which, for example, next year might be applicable, and therefore the district could just simply start concentrating on using that low growth scenario as they're planning for teacher hires, etc., but it's only going to affect probably a mere 300 students. And now Dr. Tapera is going to talk with us a little bit about utilization levels relative to the projections.
Thank you. So you've heard a lot of numbers, but now I'm going to show you a lot of pictures. And so you've heard about the projected total number of students district-wide. And the reasons behind where those projections, how they were derived and where they came from. But what's most important from a planning perspective is where those students are projected to live. And so this map shows in red the hot spots of growth. This is not surprising to you, I'm sure. These units are planning units, by the way. They're based on census block groups, and they're used as building blocks. And they, just as they were in the rezoning effort earlier this year. So the red areas that you see are not a surprise for high growth, starting up on the west side, northwest. This is Grand Mission Estates and Aliana and the future Harvest Green and Grand Vista. Aliana, did I say that here? And this is Imperial. This is Riverstone. This is Sienna South. These are some, this is a potential development north of Olympic Estates. This is now called Memorial Plantation, and this is Lakeshore Harbor. So those are the hot spots of projected growth. But now, how does that relate to the existing capacities that you have and the planned capacities of the schools? These attendance zones that you see here are what was approved by the board for next year's attendance zones in the fall of 2015, including the opening of Elementary 46 or Madden Elementary. Now, these numbers are not a surprise to you. These are the same numbers that were used throughout the zoning process, the feeder pattern alignment process. But they show the result of that approved attendance zones, including, as I mentioned, Elementary 46 here. That pulled some students primarily from Oakland, of course, as well as a few from Jordan and a few from Pecan Grove. Now, the rest of these are projections out through the end of our 10-year projection period. I think the zoning process focused on a 5-year period, but we're including these just to sort of it being all-inclusive of our entire project. So the next slide shows how those numbers of students relate to the current and planned capacities. So, of course, the opening of 46 is going to not be red because we're going to allow for some growth there. We project that elementary 46 or Madden will open at about 75% utilization, which in a high-growth area is ideal, in my opinion, because it allows some room for growth. It is enough students opening in order to be efficient, but allows some room for growth. You will notice, though, that Aliana is projected, or Madden within Aliana is projected to grow to 171% in the next decade. So clearly, another school in the area will be needed further on, but that's beyond the scope of this tonight. So, of course, the red areas are the schools with the most overcrowding projected for 2015. Not surprisingly, Commonwealth in anticipation for opening 47 the following year. We'll get to that. And Cornerstone is one of the schools slated for an expansion to accommodate those students, as well as Holly up here. An expansion for Holly is a possibility. So the next year, in 2016, with the opening of Sullivan Elementary, Elementary 47, that takes care of the red that we saw down here in Commonwealth, and basically allows both schools to be fully utilized. This doesn't happen very often in our experience, but the Commonwealth has a lot of overcrowding issues currently, and will clearly need the relief of Sullivan when it can be opened. Now, the next step, looking ahead, of course, the Oakland is projected to be back up to 155%. In 2016. The next slide that I will show you is the recommendation that came out of the feeder pattern realignment for 2017-18. These are not approved attendance zones. Nothing is decided about this. This was just the recommendation that came from this process. So Max alluded to this at the beginning when he was introducing us, that this is the point at which our annual updates, are used annually to reassess and decide what actually needs to happen based on the latest data. And so this is sort of the working plan that came out of the feeder pattern alignment process. And it includes, let's see, where do we start? It includes the opening of 48, elementary 48 in south, in Sienna South, which is now part of Sienna Plantation. That, along with the planned expansions at Schiff, Scanlon Oak, and Sienna Crossing, are going to effectively relieve all of a large part of the overcrowding in Sienna Plantation that they are currently experiencing. This recommendation from the feeder pattern plan also includes the opening of elementary 49 in Harvest Green. That's up here. Harvest Green is right around in here. That pulls a significant portion of Oakland into elementary 49, as well as a few from Pecan Grove as well. As you can see, the opening of 49, if this were to be approved, if these were to become the attendance zones for 49, then you can see that Oakland is virtually built out. What's left of Oakland attendance zone is virtually built out and stable in growth at right around 100% capacity utilization through the end of this projection period, as well as Pecan Grove. So that would be a breath of fresh air for both Oakland and Pecan Grove. Also, part of the recommendation was to open Elementary 50 up in the far northwest in Grand Vista. That is an effort to provide relief for Seguin, because as I showed you before, Seguin would otherwise be at 148% utilization if this weren't to open. Again, going backwards, Oakland would be at 165% if we weren't to open 49 here, and Scanlon and Schiff Schiff would be at 124%, and Heritage Rose would be at 130%. So those are the driving forces that drove the recommendations for opening these 3 new schools. Again, this will be revisited, and it's my understanding that these projections will now be taken by the administration into planning for updating the master facilities plan this summer. So moving on to the middle schools. Again, these are the attendance zones that were approved by the feeder alignment process. These were the numbers that were used, so this is nothing new. This is not a surprise. Of course, not surprisingly, the growth projected at Bowie is about 700 students, and at Baines is about 800 students in the next decade. Those are the hot spots of growth. Again, looking at the utilization rates of each of these schools under the next year's attendance zone, the hot spots, of course, are First Colony and Baines, with both projected to exceed 115% in 2017, if not for the opening of Middle School 15. So, as you can see, though, that before we leave this slide, the rezoning effort has done a good job of distributing the students among the existing facilities in order to create some stability over the long term. And I see a typo. There really isn't 891% utilization at Dulles. I beg your pardon. Let's make that 89%. But over the long term, good stable utilization of the existing facilities. So with the opening of Middle School 16, as was recommended by the feeder alignment process, that would provide relief to both Baines and First Colony, and would accommodate the projected student population for the south part of the district all the way through this decade. So moving on to the high schools. Again, these are the attendance zones that were approved and the numbers that were used. I didn't emphasize this earlier, and I should have. These are resident students. These are live-in population. So I understand that part of your feeder process numbers, I think Scott Leopold was presenting you some numbers that had transfers added in to do with the academies. So these may look a little bit different, but these are the same base data that Scott Leopold started with for projected resident students or live-in students. And of course, keep in mind that these include academy students where they live, not necessarily where they're attending the academies. So Travis and Dulles and Elkins and Hightower all will have an influx of students above and beyond these resident numbers. And when we look at percent utilization for 2015, of course, one of the criteria and focuses, I think, of the rezoning was to plan for future growth. So, for example, the future growth projected in Travis of, about 600 students in Travis was planned for in this rezoning to be able to accommodate that future population in the long term to provide some stability there. And so Of course, the academies, again, are drawing students out of some of these overcrowded schools into the underutilized schools, and also the new Career Tech Center will continue to provide a little bit of overcrowding relief as that gets underway. So long-term, really the focus for future overcrowding, not surprisingly, will be at Ridge Point and to some extent at Bush. So with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you both very much. That was a very nice presentation. Do any of the trustees have comments or questions? Mr. Burdine?
I wanted to make this clear. I wanted to make sure I heard you right. This is not assuming, these are just live-in students. This is not assuming the academies, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to just clarify that.
Do we have any other questions? I'd like to ask one clarifying question. I think you mentioned at some point that we have about 8% of our district in multifamily housing, and that I've forgotten what the time frame, but you expected that to increase to closer to 25 or 30%, as that's a more normal percentage as we urbanize. Would that be the correct phrasing?
I just marvel at the uniqueness of this district, having only 32 apartment complexes that are not for seniors, with such a tremendous population here and population growth. It's very unique. You know, there are 9 municipalities, 2 of which only have their ETJs within the district, but it is you're very rare, very unique. And so what we project in terms of added housing units, mainly because you are building out pretty rapidly. Of course, tremendous impact on the west and on the south, but building out very rapidly. But there's continued demand to live in this district. So what happens? There's a demand for multifamily that becomes fierce. And you can expect that to continue, even though the most respected analysts right now, for example, the analyst of 40-plus years in the Houston area, Marvin Finger, says 50 of these complexes will not be built over the next 1, 2, or 3 years throughout the Houston area. But I think that we've been very conservative in what we've projected for new apartments, and that is over the next 10 years to be 30% of all of the added housing.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Do we have any other questions, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, I have one question. On the private school chart, I'm just looking at one of them in particular because it happens to sit in the middle of the district. And you estimate that about half are coming, I guess, are coming from outside the district. And I'm just wondering how you arrive at that estimate.
We talk with one of the administrators, an attendance clerk or someone else, but they're getting accustomed to keeping this information on hand for us. Which school did you emphasize?
I was looking at the honor roll school. In particular.
355 out of 706.
Yeah, just because, I mean, it sits in the middle of the district, and I'm just surprised that there's be that many coming from
You're right.
far
You're
away.
absolutely right. That is surprising. But it may have to do with employment epicenters and where these individuals are driving from to put their children there in that school.
Okay,
But
thank
we'll
you.
double check on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mr. George?
Yeah, I have a quick question talking about middle school, especially First Colony Middle School, is showing a tremendous growth, and I'm just wondering where that is going to come from. That is First Colony Middle.
Well, let's see. Here, I just happened to stop here on the 10-year projection period. So the new housing is contributing to considerably to the.
Okay,
to
is that
growth.
coming from part of Riverstone or?
Well, let's see. I can look it up.
Again, I was just curious because I wasn't expecting that. That's why it was kind of kind of surprising me. That's all.
Yes.
Not a big deal, but
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
I can look it up, and in our database, I can tell you exactly the proportion that comes from
Okay,
new housing.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I think not. Thank you, ladies, very much. Thank you for your nice, thorough presentation, very informative. And thank you for these large binders of, and I mean that in the nicest possible way.
One thing that you might be interested in looking at, really I think it's more valuable than the large binder, is the residential development overview map. And so
Oh, good. I needed an
these are
update
so
for my living
indispensable
room.
in understanding a complex district like this one. And it's interesting to see where all of the projected new apartments are to be located.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guzman, Dr. Tepera. Thank you. All right, next up, our second report this evening. As you know, last month we started bringing routine updates on our strategic planning efforts. And so tonight, last month we heard from Human Resources. Tonight we're going to hear from Curriculum and Instruction. They're going to talk primarily about the curriculum management plan and their work in that area to address the board's priorities. They're also going to provide a brief update in relation to that about our work on special education, their special education overview. So I'm going to turn this over to our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Phyllis Hill.
Good evening. It's our pleasure to be with you this evening, and it's my pleasure to join Ms. Carabine and Ms. Vordakis in presenting our curriculum management plan. The Curriculum and Instruction Department has been doing some wonderful work, working very hard, and I want to preface tonight's presentation by telling you our work is not complete, and our plan is a work in progress, but we're very proud of the work that we have completed thus far. Tonight, the Department of Curriculum and Instruction will be providing you with an overview of our curriculum management plan. You received a hard copy of this plan earlier. Tonight, we'll be providing more details about the principles that surround this plan. Following the curriculum audit that was conducted by TASA's curriculum audit team, we began working on recommendations for improvement to our district's curriculum management. In addition, we inquired to TASA and we asked them, not wanting to recreate the wheel, can you direct us to a format that is an exemplary model for managed curriculum, for a managed curriculum plan? And they did so. However, we are Fort Bend, and as we just heard, we are a unique district, and we have some guiding principles that are unique to our district. For example, while all curriculum documents are based on the TEKS, different districts write unique curriculum to teach those TEKS, and our curriculum is indeed unique. Also, Fort Bend's emphasis on writing and teaching from a balanced curriculum philosophy is indeed unique. As we develop and revise our curriculum, we respond to state-level changes such as TEKS revision. We also revise curriculum in response to data so that we are responsive to our students' performance, and we utilize data to drive instructional improvement and change. The plan that we share this evening is indeed a work in progress. It is evidence of collaboration. It is based upon organizational change that has supported that collaboration, and it is an unfinished living document. Therefore, this collaboration, revision, and improvement is a continuous cycle of improvement that Mrs. Carabine and Ms. Vordakis will provide more detail for in a little bit. I want to call your attention to this slide, which encompasses our philosophy for curriculum. Our curriculum is a three-pronged approach. We have the written curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the assessed curriculum surrounding our curriculum philosophy. We want to write curriculum that is rigorous yet responsive to the needs of our diverse learners. We also want to monitor to be sure that our curriculum is taught in a manner that has sound pedagogy, research-based practices, and meets the needs of our diverse learners. In doing that, we want to assess our students' learning so that we are continually improving and have continuous cycles of improvement. We are fortunate that we have a school board that provides policy to guide this work. Everything we do is connected to the board's goals, commitments, and priorities, which serve as pillars for our work. The new Department of Teacher Development, plus all the important embedded support, is ongoing, and our professional learning is ongoing. We will never arrive. We will continually be trying to improve and striving for excellence. In this slide, we have the Division of Teaching and Learning, and you can see that reporting to the Chief Academic Officer, we have the Department of School Leadership with the Assistant Superintendents, the Department of Federal and Special Programs, responsible for meeting the needs of our diverse learners and preparing our students for careers and pathways beyond school, the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, which is the core business of all school districts, and the Department of Teacher Development, a new department that has now come under the umbrella to collaborate with the rest of us. In November, we provided a full curriculum management overview, and we talked about how we've worked together to eliminate silos and how we work together daily, collaborating and joining our efforts so that we come up with one product that meets the needs of all learners. Are we there? No. Are we well on the road? Yes. Are we unified in our efforts? Certainly. To meet the needs of our diverse learners, we know that teachers must be equipped. We cannot meet the needs of students in the classroom if we do not train and support our teachers. One of the initiatives that we are revisiting, this initiative was in place in a somewhat sustainable model several years ago, is differentiated instruction. At that time, there were trainers on every campus to sustain the model. Over time, and with changes in leadership, this was disbanded, and we are going to revive it as we see that with our diverse population, we must be responsive to students who struggle and to students who need increased challenge and opportunities. Our state audit shows us that we need to be more responsive to our gifted and talented students, and our TEA audit of our special education program and other state accountability reports that we'll go over later indicate that we need to be responsive to our bilingual students. There are three main policies that guide us in our work in curriculum. AE Local provides the district's core beliefs and commitments. EA Local defines the expectations. You hold us accountable for managing the curriculum so that it doesn't matter where a student goes to school, he or she should be studying the same curriculum across the school district. And EG Local specifies priorities for curriculum management and development. Now, Ms. Carabine will give you more details.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Good evening, board members. Yes, as Dr. Hill was explaining, our work is certainly not done, but we do feel very confident in the steps we're taking to work towards our strategic planning in the district. And I just want to let you know how comprehensive our group is at this point in time, working as we plan for improvement. We meet continuously. We have ongoing standing meetings with the Department of Curriculum Instruction, which includes our elementary and secondary directors of curriculum, the Director of Fine Arts, the Director of CTE, the Director of Digital Learning, the Director of GT, and Dr. Garcia's group under special and federal programs, including the Director of the ESL Bilingual Department, Director of At-Risk, College and Career Ready, and soon to be our new Director of Special Education. We sit at the table quite often, making joint decisions, and we have shared leadership throughout this process. But it's not just our group. We are meeting with business owners and subject matter experts from departments all throughout the district, because as you know, the design and delivery of curriculum is impacted by every single facet of our school district. As we began the journey to plan for improvement, we did reference the district audit, as you know, back in 2013, when Dr. Murdoch, the lead auditor at that time, shared the findings, and he reminded you that it was a deficit audit. So knowing it was a deficit audit, one of the first things they said that we had to accomplish was to create a curriculum management plan. As they found at that time, we did not meet the audit criteria to provide direction for the curriculum development or the implementation or evaluation of the curriculum. So we put plans in motion to accomplish that, and I put on the next slide just a very high-level overview to share that we began our work in that summer of 2013 after the audit findings were revealed. In addition to the audit findings, though, please know that as we plan for improvement to write and develop our curriculum, we also consider sources of student assessment data. We look at trends from our observation. We look at governance from TEA, as you know, when they revise our TEKS objectives. We look at instructional resources, especially during the adoption cycle time. All of these factors impact our decisions as we develop and design our curriculum. And we also rely on needs assessments, such as our PBMAS, our TE audits, our AP diagnostic. We solicit feedback from our teachers and our principals, as well as internal data from all of our current program and future program evaluations. So we have to take a very comprehensive approach and try to keep this as data-driven and as objective as we possibly can throughout the process. As shown on the slide, when we first sat at the table with the business owners from other departments, as well as the immediate members of our department, we had to determine ownership. That was a big part of this, deciding who would spearhead some of the planning and the determining the goals and the timeline and the tasks throughout the process. And today, in the spring of 2015, we know that we have, before we can get to the ultimate goal of the district strategic plan, each department has to have a well-designed plan. And that's what we submitted to you last week in a draft form, the curriculum management plan. And this guides our work, and this has to be a pretty solid document, as well as this type of plan for all the other departments, so that we can put all the plans together to create a very comprehensive district-wide plan. And with these plans, as pointed, as the auditors stated in the TASA curriculum audit at that time, you have to have clearly written and decisive board policies. So thank you for guiding us in that effort. It has to be institutionalized. It has to be in place so that if there's any change in personnel, if any one of us leaves our position, the next person should be able to step into our department and pick up the plan and know what our tenets are and what guides us and what the policies and the procedures and established routines are to continue on. It has to be integrated and committed to the policy and consistent, and also ensure that it's aligned with the campus improvement plans. The district plans as well as the campus plans need to be seamless. For the next slide, we chose this graphic model to depict the cycle, because as Dr. Hill was mentioning, our work is always evolving. And to use the cycle, it will help you understand the process that depending on the department and the grade level and the content, we are all in different places. And I'll give you an example. As you know, because the state mandated TEKS revisions for our math content areas, they essentially started over. We had to completely rewrite our curriculum. So when they started over, they were able to take advantage of the audit findings and adhere to the 5 audit criteria, which Susan Vorodakis will cover in more detail in just a few moments, as opposed to curriculum that was recently developed. Maybe they just have to go in and tweak it based on student assessment data. Or maybe we have a new instructional resource, so we need to go back into the curriculum and drop something like that in. So depending on what we're doing at that point in time, it may drop into the cycle in different places. But as you can see, you have to analyze to determine, that goes back to your needs assessment, so that you have objective criteria. To design, we include the objectives, assessments, prerequisites, instructional tools, and all of our approaches and strategies. This is a non-negotiable, and we've created these standards so that no matter which content, whether it's elementary math or CTE or fine arts, we want there to be consistency throughout the design. The development is when we hire and train our writing teams and go through the process of writing, which we included a more detailed account of that in the actual draft plan that we submitted to you last week. The implementation piece is huge because you can have the best written, well-designed, balanced curriculum out there, but if it's not implemented without fidelity, then that would not serve us well. So the implementation piece is where we drop professional development in, which I'll cover in more detail in a few minutes. But that's the training and support piece. And then the evaluation piece is critical with everything that we do in a school district, is being accountable for our actions, and again, being accountable for the development, the design, the implementation, and then back to the analyzing piece. So as Dr. Hill said, our work is never done, because even if we're completely finished and we're satisfied with the material, the state will change the TEKS, or we'll have a different resource, or our needs may change. We have to constantly monitor our assessment data to meet the needs of our students. And then I'm going to invite Susan to come up and to go into a little more detail on this one.
Good evening, everyone. So Ms. Carabine has been talking about the planning and the cycle of the work. So what is it that we work on? Well, that brings us to this particular graphic, and actually this captures a lot of EA, EG, as well as the audit findings, and so I'll explain that a little bit further. Starting in the different pie shapes that you see around the circle with objectives, those actually come to us from the state. Those are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or the TEKS, as we refer to them very often, that come to us in each of the program areas and are defined externally, outside of the school district. But that's where we start. We next look at how would those objectives be assessed? What types of measures would we use to assess? How would they appear on state assessments and other types of assessments? So that becomes the second piece of the focus of our work. We also look at prerequisites. Prerequisites as in, what does the student need to know before they come to a particular grade level to help them have a foundation when they get to the grade level that they are currently in. We look at what will happen with regard to a topic or objective in a grade level and even beyond. When will the student see this information again, and what will they need to know going forward to be successful in future courses? And then we also look at different types of instructional tools and methodologies that we can use in the classroom as part of our pedagogy, and that also includes the instructional approaches, different strategies that would be used, different kinds of resources that we would utilize in the classroom and make available to our teachers and our students. So those are the things that we work on developing once we take a look at our objectives that are embedded for each of the courses. When the EG Local actually specifies that we need to include all of these things within our written curriculum. So that's how this graphic connects to that particular policy. In terms of the audit, the auditors look to see, first of all, they look, did we have each of those components in each of the courses that we presented as courses that we offer in our district. The second layer of the auditor's look was, what was the quality of those items within the curriculum? So in some cases, a course did not have all of those pieces built out. In other cases, it may have had those pieces within it, but they weren't of the quality that the auditors were looking for in terms of the rigor, the extent to which, for example, instructional tools or instructional approaches were included, or maybe a course only had 3 out of 5 of the particular elements that you see there. So that's how the outer bands connect to those key pieces within policy and the audit findings. Now, the star in the middle is the differentiation, and you've heard both of them reference that. That is our goal. In addition to building out all of the pieces and high quality within all of those areas, we do want to be mindful of all of the diversity of students that we have in our district. And so that is a goal that we have set for ourselves within the curriculum department, is to not only build out the quality and depth of the curriculum, but to make sure that it is user-friendly and appropriate for all of our students. And that is something that will be ongoing as well. We have different teams and departments that feed into the differentiation that are in transition, and we've begun some of this work in some of our courses and in some of our program areas, but we know that it'll be something that'll be work that we work on for years to come. On the next slide, as both Dr. Hill and Ms. Carabine have referenced, it was about a year ago that we received the updated and approved EG Local from the board, as well as EA, that talked about the idea of managed curriculum and also the guarantees that we put forward a balanced, unbiased curriculum. And so since that time, we have, to use the word that was mentioned previously, work to institutionalize those beliefs. And that is to get the word out to our stakeholders in terms of our administrators as well as our teachers about these expectations. And so in the last year, we've had 3 different trainings that have touched on teacher groups as well as the administrator groups, starting back in the summer with a training that was directed to social studies teachers. We moved forward in November and presented a training to principals to turn around on their campuses, and we call that training Analyzing the Artifacts, which was a way of presenting look-fors and tools to principals and other administrators in terms of evaluating components of curriculum that maybe didn't come directly from our district curriculum, but teachers had created themselves or procured in other ways. And then in February, our principals received or actually directed training that we had provided for them with regard to other tools and processes for addressing the balanced, unbiased curriculum as well. And some of these artifacts and documents are included in that curriculum management plan that we shared with you last week. So internally within the curriculum department, we've taken that idea of balance a step further, and we've identified these key areas that you see listed on the slide that we want to build out and make sure that they become the lens that all of our curriculum is looked at through as we are developing it and as we are deploying it. A lot of these things are things that people might think would be common sense, but until you put it to paper and hold it as a rubric against which you measure the work that's being developed and being used, we felt like that we couldn't just assume that it was being done and being embedded. So we're working on an internal framework that we can use as part of our development process with our writers and trainers to make sure that we have a sense of balance going forward across our curriculum areas. And so you have a draft of that as well, but that is something that we will continue to work on as well as to begin training our various stakeholder groups on too. This particular slide is just an update on where we were in 2013 and where we are now in terms of curriculum development. And I'd like to go through almost line by line and discuss some of the numbers that you see and why there is fluctuation. Our K-5 core content area has been very stable. We don't add courses in those particular areas on a traditional basis. So the numbers that they had in 2013 are reflected across the chart in the same way up through today. But you begin to see some differences in the secondary area, and I'd like to explain those. Starting with secondary ELA, the auditors identified 20 courses at that time, with 11 of those showing curriculum. But now the number is quite different. In 2014-15, up to 63. And the reason for that is because we have realigned some courses that were formerly in fine arts and brought those under English language arts, because that's actually the program area where those TEKS and objectives come from. So we've done some realignment. But remember too, one of the things that the auditors asked us to do is really to build out courses for all of the different levels that we have. So that brings in pre-AP and AP to the picture as well. So ELA is building out and has been building out courses in their pre-AP, AP strand of offerings as well. And so that factors into that larger number. And so when you go from 11 in 2013 to 26 built out courses as of right now, with that 63 number in the middle there changing dramatically, that's a reflection of those realignments. Going on to secondary math, as Ms. Carabine mentioned, this is the area where the secondary math team has spent the last 2 years building out first the middle school curriculum and then the high school level curriculum, which they are currently finishing up this spring. The number of courses there increased too because we have a number of the pre-AP and AP offerings that we're building curriculum for, as well as a couple of courses that connect to the CTE area that we are offering. Secondary science, again, we see a shift in the numbers of total courses available when you factor in the pre-AP and AP levels, as well as connections to CTE science-based courses as well. Secondary social studies, primarily there is the pre-AP and AP factoring into that mix. World languages is interesting because notice that there were 40 courses in 2013 and then again 40 courses, but it's not necessarily the same 40 courses. Back in 2013, we had Arabic and Hindi on the books, and they had curriculum with them, but we have we haven't completely taken them away, but they're not currently offered because there has not been interest, nor have we had staff for those in recent years. And so there was a decrease in number of courses that way, but we added that back into the overall total because of the pre-AP and AP courses that we're building out in world languages there. And also world languages is transitioning their TEKS. Are also under redevelopment, so they are doing some work across the board on every course, even those that they previously had curriculum developed for. Okay, health, K-5 health, 7th grade health, and high school health has remained pretty stable. As you know, we have a new coordinator over those two program areas, health and PE, and she is working with teams of writers even this year to work on improving and developing out curriculum where it did not previously exist. So that touches those two rows as well. And then CTE, fine arts, and technology applications, you can see their progress in terms of current courses and those that have curriculum. Okay. What I'm going to do on these next few slides is show you a series of screenshots within our curriculum. So we've talked about the planning, we've talked about the work, we've talked about the components. I'd like to show you what it looks like as the teachers go into our curriculum in PCG, that's the name of our curriculum management system, and what do they see as they are preparing to plan for their lessons. So again, these next few slides are a series of screenshots. PCG, the framework of it is organized very vertically, so it's a lot of scrolling up and down to see the components. So you will notice that some words or lines may be cut off in this view, but you will still be able to see the overarching components that are built into the curriculum. So this is a unit in 8th grade social studies that the teachers are actually working in now. And it's the Civil War and Reconstruction. You'll notice that within this unit, as with every unit, we provide an estimated time frame of days. How many days will it take to address the objectives and the topics and concepts within this unit? So this is a pretty lengthy unit. It's a pretty substantial unit in terms of the overall scope of 8th grade social studies. It's a foundational unit, if you will, as it carries many different objectives that the teachers address. What you see on the remaining lines here are examples of some of the TEKS, the actual state standards, as they are written from the state level. Now, you've only got about 6 objectives showing here. This is a comprehensive unit over almost a month's time, and it really has about 25 objectives in it. So this is just a very small sampling of the objectives within this. Over to the right, you will notice that there are what we call unwrapped documents or unwrapped standards. Some of our standards that we've identified as key fundamental standards that have a vertical component that are very important in assessments, readiness standards, they're known as at the state level, supporting standards. We do additional work and unwrap those particular objectives and provide sample guiding questions that teachers work with the students around. We provide more explanation on the content and the skills required, as well as sample assessment items. So there's additional information for the teacher in those particular documents. On the next slide, and again, envision this scrolling down, if you were the teacher in PCG, you would see where we have our prerequisite and our connections to previous and future courses. So in this, basically what we ask is, what should the student know before they come to this course about this topic in this area? What will they learn during this? What will be the major components of their instruction during this time? And what connections does it have to future courses? So you see that play out here in this particular section. Notice that thinking to the future, this unit is on Civil War and Reconstruction. That does not come up in subsequent courses as its own unit of instruction unless it's an AP course. In the traditional high school course, which most of our students are taking right now, the second half of U.S. history, they don't have those as standalone units. But definitely they need that information to move forward in that high school course. The other thing that I will clue you in over here to the right, the green area, there is a column that scrolls down the right-hand side, and these are resources that are attached to this particular unit. So you're seeing some examples of resources that relate to the Civil War and other topics within the unit. Again, there are instructional strategies and pedagogy recommendations, how to engage students, how to get them interested in this topic and some specific activities that simulate or help them identify with the information that they're going to be learning. It references resources that we have in our district that we have provided. And again, you'll see in the green area over here, the other resources continue to scroll. I mean, they continue to populate. We also include a section in this particular unit, in all social studies units, in many of the core content areas, academic vocabulary. And these are words that come from the objectives themselves that are crucial to the particular concepts and content related to this unit. They are words that have been frequent flyers, if you will, on previous state assessments. So that's something that we attune to and build that into our units, our curriculum. And then this is a section further down, again, that shows teachers how to apply a variety of strategies. And there are quite a few strategy recommendations, and they almost always connect directly back to a resource that's also listed in that right-hand column. So different ways of teaching the information to engage a variety of student modalities and student interests, as well as communicating the content and skills that students need to learn. Again, you see a whole section down here on assessment suggestions. In this unit, the teachers would also have a bank of assessment items, and they can take those items and they can just use them straight as is in terms of a formative assessment, or they can take those items and they can embed them in a teacher-made test that might have more questions to it. So the assessments are very user-friendly. I do also want to go back up for just 1 second and point out that in this set of resources, you'll see model lessons that are included. And this is an example of lesson plans that have been developed by the curriculum department and made available to teachers that they could use sort of straight off the shelf, if you will, just right out of this. And it's most of these are 2 to 3, sometimes 5-day lessons that even within them, they're kind of a self-contained. They have everything that the teacher needs in terms of which objectives, which strategies, which kinds of assessments and activities the teacher would use for that portion of this unit. So that is a very quick overview of what things look like in PCG. And so those components that were on the wheel a little bit earlier, this is what they look like actually played out in our online curriculum.
Thank you, Susan. As we mentioned previously, in the curriculum development cycle, professional development is critical for the implementation of our curriculum. Therefore, the burden is on us to develop and to support and to equip our teachers to deliver the curriculum through effective instructional strategies. And this is where professional development comes into play. And we're very excited about the new division coming under Dr. Hill for the Director of Teacher Development to guide this initiative. But we made a very conscious effort this year to create just a very solid foundation with a very narrowed but deep approach, because sometimes educators have the reputation to have too many initiatives or too many programs, and every year a new flavor of the month, if you will. So again, we made a very concerted effort to stay true to some solid foundational pieces this year that drove our professional development, namely the policies that you guys adopted and the founding principles behind managed and balanced curriculum and instruction. We focused on the lesson cycle and the processes. We trained our teachers on this, but just as importantly, we trained our principals so that they could inspect what we expect. We trained and focused on the teaching and learning piece, which included balanced curriculum and instruction, student engagement, checking for understanding, and most importantly, this year we found to be a deficit in the past is supporting our diverse learners, which includes our English language learners, bilingual students, gifted and talented, and special education. We also have joined forces with the Talent Management Department to align our efforts with new teacher orientation, and with the new division, we'll transfer all that over. But in the past and for this year, we make sure that any new teachers new to the profession or new to our school district, we include these foundation pieces so that they can be up to speed with our existing teachers. And we also spend a lot of time teaching them to navigate what we have in our PCG online curriculum so that they have the same opportunities and development as their peers when they join our workforce. Also, again, just a glimpse, an added glance at what happens when we deliver the professional development. It occurs throughout the year, with the biggest emphasis occurring during the summer. For example, last year, the Curriculum and Instruction Department offered over 700 courses for all the different content areas and grade levels. We have days dedicated in August when the teachers return back to work for our new teacher orientation, as well as all the teachers that didn't fulfill the requirements throughout the summer. We have also embedded days during the school calendar year where we have campus days. We call them with a district focus, and this is where we come in and train our principals or other members of the staff to go back and deliver it. This is an effective tool as it builds capacity and trains the campus staff to be able to replicate what we're doing throughout the summer and support our efforts with the delivery and monitoring and implementation of the curriculum. And then we have the job-embedded professional development that our team plays a critical role as we deploy out as directors, coordinators, and our helping teachers and the other departments, facilitators and coordinators as well. And this is when we go into the classroom and we work alongside our teachers, serving and supporting and helping them plan for instruction at that level. We have a lot of internal presenters and developers, including our assistant superintendents, our directors present, the deputy superintendent, chief academic officer. We all play a role in the development of our teachers and our principals, as well as our coordinators and helping teachers. And we draw heavily from the field. We have lots of master teachers in the different school settings that join forces with us, as well as external providers. We contract with experts that lead in the field, and they come in and work with us in different capacities as well. Dr. Hill is going to come up and talk about the managed instruction piece of our plan.
Okay, once again, linking to EA local policy. This is the policy that tells us that we must be consistent across the district. Earlier, I mentioned the written, taught, and tested curriculum. And in your policy, you state that we must manage these and require adequate resources, effective management, and highly qualified teachers. So we're going to move into just what does that look like and how do we manage or monitor that. Managed curriculum is the coordination of consistency across subject areas, grade levels, and schools. As I indicated earlier, it shouldn't matter where you go to school. You should be studying the same thing. K through 12, continuum of learning, so there are no gaps and no unnecessary overlaps. When good curriculum management is in place, there's alignment in the written curriculum, the content, what we want students to learn. There is alignment in the context, how it's taught, how it is presented in the classroom, and the tested curriculum, how we are going to assess it, and what we expect each learner to gain from the instruction. I grew up with a father who told me that if you want to see progress, you must count it. What gets counted is important. I think the state subscribes to that. I think our local taxpayers subscribe to that, and they expect assessment. They want us to evaluate how are our students learning. We have national assessments, and those are listed in this slide. Next month, when we come, we're going to point out that there has been some change in ACT and PLAN, which is now, PLAN is administered in 9th grade, but there will be some changes in that. One of the tests that you might not be quite as familiar with is TELPAS, and that's our test where we assess our students' proficiency in the English language. Along with our national assessments and our state assessments, which are mandated, we have local assessments. And sometimes I think we make the mistake of speaking in acronyms that may or may not be familiar to you. So I want to just quickly touch on these. One of the local assessments are DAs, our district assessments of our curriculum. So we teach the curriculum, and then we periodically provide district assessments to see how students are progressing. We're excited about having Eduphoria, a new user-friendly data system that will be accessible to teachers and principals so that they can quickly determine students' progress and make adjustments. Along with those local assessments that are more periodic, we give more comprehensive benchmarks. As you know, the state limits the number of benchmarks that we can give, and we wouldn't want to overdo this anyway. But it does tell us how students are progressing in comprehensive knowledge over a longer period of time. We have common formative assessments. Those are very frequently developed at the campus level, and Ms. Carabine talked about test banks and pulling questions. And these are often, the format is often they're studied in professional learning communities when they're making instructional adjustments. We have the developmental reading assessments. These developmental reading assessments are diagnostic in nature, where the state gives a criterion reference test. You either pass or fail. Our nationally normed test, you're judged against other students in norm referenced assessment. How did you compare against other students who are in your group? The developmental reading assessment, the DRA, will point out how a student is developing with all the components of reading and indicate where improvement might be needed so teachers can zero in on a specific area of need. The phonemic awareness phonics inventory is often called the PAPI, and this is for our earlier learners, and it's an assessment of early reading skills, and it also is diagnostic in nature and provides a roadmap for teachers to intervene and to guide students' progress. We talked about counting or evaluating what you value. You have a managed curriculum policy, and you hold us accountable for monitoring. We monitor through the Curriculum and Instruction Department, we monitor through our special programs, and we monitor through the Department of School Leadership. We have what we call TAP forms, and these take various forms, and we look for different factors. The Department of School Leadership, if you note in this slide, conducted 950 walkthroughs that are documented. The department actually did more walkthroughs than this, but this is how many they documented on the TAP forms, and in a little while I'll show you what they were looking for. The Department of Curriculum and Instruction conducted 2,137 walkthroughs, and in secondary math alone, 2,614. We just started using the instrument with ESL and bilingual, and we are in the process of getting this into our special education department. However, it will look somewhat different because all of the instruction in special education is directed by individual education plans, and much of the TAP form is a more comprehensive view. However, there are things that we do need to look at comprehensively, and we have added 4 additional inclusion questions for principals to be utilizing between now and the end of the year. As we look into monitoring and metrics, the Department of School Leadership is looking, if you look at the red column on the left, their area is more the pedagogy, the alignment, student engagement, rigor, equity, and access to the curriculum. There are various areas that we look at when we do these walkthroughs. The walkthroughs are stored in rack space so that immediately they can be uploaded to the cloud, and we can generate reports pretty quickly. So we can look at trends within a school, trends across a feeder pattern, trends across the district, and work with curriculum and instruction. And Ms. Carabine.
Thank you. I'll talk about the middle column. This is the secondary math observation metrics. It's not all of them. I believe they actually have 23 objectives on their walkthrough form. Depending on the needs of the campus and the trends in the data, they use some of these to drive more discussion than others. So some of the things that you might see is they're monitoring the lesson cycle. They're looking at questioning strategies. And a lot of these objectives, we've actually spent a lot of time on professional development. So again, I'm going to go back to you can have the best curriculum out there, but if they're not implementing it with fidelity, with good, solid, research-based instructional strategies, then we're not going to get where we need to be with meeting the needs of our students. So all of these objectives that you see on here we feel are very important. Instructional strategies, the method of the student responses, the level of engagement. These are all very important objectives, and these are the metrics that we use, and in a minute I'll show you how we convert it to data that drives and informs our work in the department. The third column is I combined this curriculum, our coordinators and helping teachers, some of the special education staff is starting to do this, and our ESL bilingual support team is also trying to embrace this model. And I do want you to know that when this third column, this team of people, we don't go into the classroom with the intent to observe. We're not a part of the evaluation team. We don't want to partner with the campus so much when it comes to the teacher's appraisal. We're here to serve and support, to remove obstacles, to develop, to guide, to help our teachers to be successful and to implement our curriculum and get them to where they need to be so that they have all the tools necessary to meet the needs of our students. Now, our time in the classroom lends itself to conversations with principals that might lead to an observation. If we go in and see something happening that should not be happening, maybe they're not aligned to the curriculum, or we don't see any evidence of rigor, or they are struggling with instructional resources, they're using something that we don't approve, anything like that, our team knows to alert the principal or the assistant superintendent, and we let them have that conversation. We don't want to be seen as the punitive or the one in the evaluation role. We want to be seen as the service and the support model. So some of the things that we do when we're out in the field is we help the teachers understand how to use data to drive support, because when you're working with curriculum, the what part that has to be taught, the standards-based TEKS curriculum, is a non-negotiable. You have to teach what the state's telling us to teach. The how part, the instructional modalities, the decision to deliver it in whatever modality is where they have some discretion. And then when we say data-driven, they need to understand that the assessment piece is not separate and apart from curriculum and instruction. The assessment is actual vital because the results from that should inform their instruction, their planning for lessons. It should determine their intervention and their levels of enrichment as well. We also, again, we serve hugely as job-embedded professional development. We might model for the teacher, we could co-teach, we could watch them and provide feedback, we can help them implement a new instructional strategy. It's taking the development into the field, if you will. And then there's others on there that I won't go through, but a big one for us is curriculum alignment, of course, the differentiation piece, and we even help them with classroom management, because if they can't control the class and have order and establish routines, then the teachers would really struggle with the whole process. Dr. Hill's going to come back up because with the monitoring and the metrics piece, we have to convert it into graphs and different ways to share this out, and I'll let her talk about the Department of School Leadership.
Sometimes we talk about rigor, and people wonder, well, what is rigor, and how do you know if a lesson has rigor? This pie graph is developed based on Bloom's taxonomy, the new Bloom's taxonomy. There was an old Bloom's, and it's been revised so that the very top includes creating. It used to be evaluation and synthesis. But we realized that we really need to give learners the opportunity to be creative, and the former Bloom's did not include that at the very top. So when you think higher order thinking and rigor, at the very bottom, remembering is the lowest level, just basic recall. That would be like your spelling words. Yes, I can recall how to spell my spelling words. Whereas the very top level, creating, would be taking something you've learned and creating something new and different from that learning. And that is rigor. That is an opportunity for higher level thinking. And these are representative of our school district and the Department of School Leadership's observations. When we look at the next slide, we're talking about engagement. And these levels of engagement are based upon the work of Philip Schlecke, who has done quite a bit of research and training nationally in student engagement. When we look at the top one, and these aren't necessarily listed in order, but they do correspond to the pie graph, authentic engagement means that students find value in what they're learning. It's meaningful, they enjoy it, they continue because they are valuing it. Passive compliance means that they will do it, they'll do the work to avoid a negative consequence. So I will do it because I don't want something else to happen if I don't do it. Rebellion, a student refuses to do it and disrupts the class. Retreatism, there's very little energy on the student's part. They're not disruptive, but they're not really engaged either. They may be in and out of the lesson. They're not really enjoying or finding value in it. Ritual compliance, the student does the work without seeing value, but does it for an extrinsic value, for a reward. And these are many times the student who asks, are you going to grade this? What did I make? And the emphasis becomes upon the grade rather than the learning. And so that's what was seen by the 950 observations conducted by the Department of School Leadership.
Thank you. Again, this is representation from Stephanie Williams' secondary math team. They do go out when they're in this role, and they conduct instructional walkthroughs to monitor the implementation of curriculum and instruction for secondary. So I'm going to share with you an example from one of our middle school settings. And again, we're very proud that they've accomplished 2,600 walkthroughs this year. And this is just one of the objectives that I thought was interesting. It's instructional alignment, and I am pleased to report that that they conducted these walkthroughs last year, and we do see marked improvement this year. And I think we moved a little cheese along the way because this was us going into the classroom and watching the teachers and comparing what we saw to what should have been happening in the curriculum. And as if you recall, when Susan Vorodakis was sharing, when you log into the curriculum and you see the pacing, they have a suggested amount of time that you should spend on a unit with a certain number of objectives that need to be covered. And you have to, stay true to that as much as possible, or you will run out of the days of school, number of days in the school year to teach what is necessary or what's mandated by the state. So this, for example, is again instructional alignment, and we were measuring alignment with the pacing, whether or not the teacher was actually still within the range during the unit of instruction, or they were not aligned at all. And for example, sixth grade math. And this data was compiled from September to now. We just closed it out about a week ago. The green means that they were where they needed to be. They're in that unit, and they're maybe right on target, or maybe a day ahead or a day behind. So we give them credit for being where they need to be. The orange or kind of brownish color is that they're not aligned. They're off pace, but at least they're still in that unit. And then the yellow part is they're not aligned at all. Maybe they're way too far ahead, or maybe way too far behind. So what we do with these results is share them with the teachers. The principals are very receptive to us coming in and being a part of the professional learning communities. We've empowered the principals to join forces with us and to own this. We've built a lot of capacity for them to understand and to segregate the data also. But most importantly, we've supported our teachers to help them get back on track. Because if you don't address it and have this courageous conversation and you let them stay out of alignment, then half a school year could slip by and they haven't taught the curriculum at the pace and the scale that they need to. And this is difficult because we also realize we have a diverse population of students, and sometimes if they come into the classroom and they're already performing grade levels below where they should be at that point in time, we have to teach the teachers how to meet the needs of the student while still forging on with the curriculum. So this includes a lot of professional development with scaffolding and building a foundation with spiraling and allowing some opportunity for remediation, but not losing sight of where we need to go and cover the grade level appropriate materials. So it's a very difficult task. So to share that there's not nearly as much yellow this year as there was compared to last year is a huge celebration and accomplishment. And also keep in mind with the TEKS revision, and it's a lot more difficult with the level of rigor and the expectations set forth in the state. We're very proud that the teachers have been receptive and willing to respond to the amount of support that we have out there for them. On the next slide, again, this is just another objective that they happen to measure. I just wanted you to see a sampling of how we use the metrics, and we convert them into some kind of data and graphic that we can sit down and share with the campus and at a district level or conversation with the principal. This particular objective that they were measuring was the method of student response, and we actually teamed up with the Department of School Leadership, and they were looking at this as well because what we were noticing, especially last year, and it's starting to decrease, so that's a good thing. We know for students to learn and be successful in the classroom, they have to be engaged. So we had to rein this in because we were starting to notice that when we'd walk into the classrooms at different grade levels, different contents, different buildings in the district, the majority of what we were seeing is what we call shout out, just answers were just coming out at the teacher. And that's not acceptable at all times because you don't know who's giving the answer or if they're giving the right answer or if they're on task or if they need support, if they need redirection or reinforcement. So we're trying to train the teachers and give them the support they need to come up with strategies so that you can measure every student's response to ensure that they're on task. Because another common thing that we would see from data like this is the teacher tends to call on the student that they know will have the right answer so they can move the lesson along. And there are certain students in the class that, they're going to raise their hand and they want to be called on and they will volunteer. And then you have some students sitting there, maybe they're underperforming, maybe they're capable, maybe they're disengaged, maybe they don't know, maybe they're frustrated. For any number of reasons, they might not be responding. So it's the burden's on the teacher to get them all engaged and to use strategies that would not allow anyone to opt out of the learning process. Because if we don't measure the response and check for understanding and make an adjustment right then and there, then it's sometimes too late and the instructional gap occurs and it's very difficult to close. So this was a very important task for us to accomplish this year. And then Dr. Hill.
I'd like to give you an example of how we might process something. In the fall, in doing these walkthroughs, we noticed, particularly in some of our upper grade levels, that we were not having higher order thinking questions to the level we wanted. So we worked together, Department of School Leadership and Curriculum and Instruction and Federal and Special Programs. We developed a trainer of trainer model. We trained the principals at one of their meetings. They went out to every campus and provided that professional development in February in a systemic way so that we would have district-wide improvement. And that is one example of seeing the walkthrough, providing the professional development, and we have had positive feedback about that training and its impact on instruction. These are the areas of evaluation that we are continually looking at. We're continually evaluating our curriculum with the 5 standards from the TASA audit. We are continually looking at our instruction through data and assessments and through our walkthroughs, and we are working on better systems to evaluate our instructional resources so that we can be sure that we do have balance and that they are of high quality. The artifact review that Ms. Vorodakis gave is an example of that. Every year we evaluate our instructional programs to see if they are making a difference, if we want to continue them, if they're with a vendor, if we want to continue the contract, or we want to discontinue. And then as we move forward, we must continually enhance our curriculum to be responsive to our diverse learners. And in closing, we believe there is a brilliant child locked inside every student, and it's our goal to find where his or her talents and skills are so that they can flourish and reach their full potential. Are there any questions this evening?
Thank you, Dr. Hill. And ladies, that was very nice. There's a lot of good information there. I'm glad to see all these walkthroughs are happening and this data's being collected. I think I might speak for the board in the sense that we're looking forward to seeing this data on a regular basis so we can see and understand what's going on in our schools and look for and look at and follow what's happening.
One of the reasons we have more math walkthroughs than other areas is we increased our manpower in that department due to a district need earlier, and we didn't pull it back, and we're glad we didn't. We have more boots on the ground, so to speak, to conduct those walkthroughs, and since the state kind of jumped over some developmental areas and increasing the expectations for math, we're glad that we have that support out in the field, and you can see from what Ms. Carabine is saying that it is paying off to have that support out there in classrooms.
Do any of the trustees have any questions? Mrs. Tassan.
Thank you. First of all, thank you guys very much for putting together such a comprehensive update and for going through things in detail. It helps me, so I appreciate that. I do have a few questions. First, you guys said that you're going to revive the trainers on the campuses. So does that mean you were talking about the trainers to train? Is that what we're talking about? And do we have someone currently on every campus that can do that?
The principals have indicated 2 people on each campus. They'll be trained in differentiated instruction with the first training to begin in May. And then we will follow up with other trainings for the trainer of trainers, and we'll continue to periodically check in and increase the tools in their toolbox during the year so that we have that sustainability, and that's the reason we want 2 on each campus.
So the trainers are going to go back to the campus and train the rest of the staff on campus. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so looking at your analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate circle, how are we making sure, or how are we evaluating and making sure that, number one, the curriculum is being delivered and with balance and fidelity, and number two, in making sure that all of the teachers in the classrooms are actually implementing what we're teaching them, the differentiated instruction model that we're teaching?
This slide?
Yes.
How can we make sure that?
So 2 questions. I'll start with the first one, which is kind of it's a springboard off of the trainers.
Okay.
Okay. So how are we going to make sure that the teachers on the campuses that are being trained are implementing the differentiated instruction within the classroom?
The trainers themselves?
The
Or
teachers that
the
are being
teachers
trained.
that are being trained.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I think that our professional learning communities serve as our best research model to plan that differentiated instruction, because that's not something that you can necessarily just go in and shoot from the hip. It has to be intentionally planned. And we'll be going over protocols to put that into our PLCs, in addition to integrating more differentiation as we write curriculum, more ideas for differentiation.
Okay, so that's good, because that was going to be my next question. Ginger, did you have something to
I
add?
think I could add to that. Our principals are the first line of monitoring, so that what we do, we've learned, the hard way, that if you don't develop the principles simultaneously with the teachers, then we can't inspect what we expect. So we're training them alongside the teachers so that when they go out into the classroom, they know what to look for. So they're the first line. All of our principals, assistant principals, associates, deans, our department heads, team leaders, specialists, anyone on the campus that we can get our hands on to build capacity so they can be our eyes and ears and boots on the ground. The next line it kind of occurs at the same time. Our Department of School Leadership is very visible. They're out on the campuses daily, walking through, looking over the shoulders of the principal, collaborating, supporting our efforts, because we're out in the field as well. Again, when they see us coming, we want them to see us as service and support, and not a, I got you. But you've got to know what we're seeing is driving a lot of discussion on the campus, and it's they've been very receptive to it, because the teachers want to do right by students, and they just need the guidance, the support, and the development to make this happen. So we're working with the Department of School Leadership to build in some more objectives on some of our walkthrough instruments, so that we're complementing each other and coordinating our efforts and speaking the same language at times, because when we go in, we need to have some very common vocabulary. So there's going to be a lot of monitoring and accountability, but lots of training and support so that they can achieve what we're asking them to do.
So have we trained all of the principals to date?
So far, yes, we've rolled it out 2 different times, but we've got a big round coming in May, yes.
Okay, so I do understand what you're saying, that you don't want the Department of Professional Leadership to kind of be the got you, but I do want to, I think we want to have some accountability there. So that was going to be one of my questions as well, is I assume you guys are holding the principals accountable, and the principals are holding the teachers accountable.
Curriculum and instruction is the supportive arm. The Department of School Leadership does meet with the principals after every walkthrough, and that is a more accountability. Okay. And it's not a gotcha. It's very simply just like what I told you earlier about the higher level questioning. We didn't see that. We were actually in a higher performing school. Met with the principals, said, we went into X number of classrooms, and this is what we saw and this is what we didn't. And after we did that 2 or 3 times, we saw this is systemic. We need to address this as a school system. And whether we need to tweak at an individual campus or bring people back in and address it systemically, we can't sustain it without both the support and the accountability.
So that leads to my other question on the evaluate portion of this circle, this graph. How are we making sure, or how are we evaluating that the curriculum is being delivered with balance and in an unbiased way and with fidelity? How does that process look?
I'm going to go back to the monitoring piece. In addition to what we observe when we're standing in the classroom and what we'll have on our rubric as far as metrics for measurement, We also look at the data, and I'm very excited, as Dr. Hill shared, with our new Eduphoria program to come in. It's going to be more user-friendly. We want to build capacity with our teachers so they can look at the data and find the trends themselves. And you can see, if you really know how to look at the data and disaggregate it, if you're not meeting the needs of your diverse learning population. So the data will drive those discussions as well. Because when you start looking at, you know, third grade males as an English language learner and they're not performing, then you have to have that conversation. You know, what are you doing and what can the adult do differently so this type of student can perform up to par with their non-English language learner peers or their non-disabled peers. So data speaks volumes. And we owe it to the campus to empower them to understand how to look at that and to identify those trends early on, to make the adjustments with differentiation, and then of course observation in the class and accountability at the campus level, and back to the professional development. If we give them the tips and tools to do this with fidelity, I think it's just an ongoing monitoring and data-driven process with lots of discussion and a lot of trust to make sure the teachers know that this is not a new program or an initiative or a new buzzword out there. It's just a way of teaching. It's ensuring that we're meeting the needs of all students.
So I think, maybe I didn't state it correctly, because I'm less concerned about the data and whether or not, I mean, I know that we assess and we're looking at whether students are achieving and we're looking at progress. My question was really centered around how are we evaluating that the curriculum is being implemented in a balanced and unbiased way, because that's specifically what's written there. It's being delivered with fidelity and being delivered in a balanced and unbiased way. So I understand we can look at data, we can assess, we can look at data, are the students performing, but I want to see, you know, part of our policy is that we're going to have a balanced and unbiased curriculum. How are we evaluating that in our classrooms?
Well, the Department of School Leadership, when they go out, they have iBook lessons that the Department of Curriculum and Instruction provides, so they know when they go into a classroom that this teacher should be teaching this and be within a good range on the pacing guide, not dramatically off or veering from that. It isn't like on Tuesday you have to be on such and such page or such and such lesson, but within a reasonable area. And if you look at your Appendix B, pages 16 and 17, there are some indicators for balance: objective balance, content balance, skill and process balance, balance of rigor, social balance, balance of student products, and resource balance. I'd also like to get Ms. Vorodakis to tell you a little bit about the training on the artifact balance, because at any time a teacher could bring something into a lesson to make a point or clarify it, and we want principals to be able to train teachers, to give teachers expectations, and to respond appropriately if they find materials that we wouldn't want there.
And really, that's really the crux of my question is, yeah, so, because not the pacing, because I have a comment on the pacing as well, because I'm not so sure. Pacing concerns me, and it's really above this district. It's the TEKS that I know concerns all of us, and you know, I'm concerned about if we give a set amount of time to teach something, how are we remediating? How are we reteaching? How are we getting to those students who are falling between the cracks? And I see it happening in my house, actually. So the pacing does concern me.
Two-edged sword.
Yeah, I mean, it concerns me a great deal. And I know, Ms. Carabine, I think you said something about, you know, that it's an accomplishment to see everyone kind of staying on track with the pacing. And on the other side of it, I'm actually a little concerned about that, because what I see happening is the pacing sort of driving what's happening in the classroom. And if we have students that aren't succeeding the first time on the test, the test in the classroom, not STAR testing and that kind of thing, then where is the reteaching happening? Because we're driving so hard to get at the end of the lesson within the 28 days. So I do have some concerns that I see in the classrooms with that, and I would like to get your thoughts on how to address that. But the crux of that last question really was kind of the balance and the bias. That is something that has been important to the board. It is in policy, and making sure that we're evaluating that appropriately, I think, is a
It's a
concern.
strong expectation as
Yeah.
we're out on campuses, and we have made it known with our principals that it's a strong expectation that they are monitoring that. And we understand that this is important to the board, it's important to our community, and it's important to us that we exercise that oversight and that what is represented in the classrooms meets both the TEKS and the state's expectations while falling within the expectations of our board.
So with regard to the pacing issue, how are we allowing our teachers or giving them the opportunity to go back and reteach these lessons or remediate and, you know, for students that may struggle with something?
We actually have that in writing as an expectation, and I'm going to let Ms. Vorodakis explain that.
So yes, it is part of our policy that when a student is not successful, that they have the opportunity to receive reteaching and reassessment. And that can be done through a variety of methods that are spelled out within the policy. It can be done in the classroom itself directly right away. It can be done in a small group setting for students who have not been successful. It can be through a tutorial program. We've also looked at ways this year to begin using Edgenuity, the program that we have first adopted really to look at online coursework, but it provides courses that we can pull from to provide information for students to actually reteach assignments as well as reassess using some of the Edgenuity platform itself. So we're looking at expanding the methods and the sources of information that we can provide for teachers to be able to do that, but it is an expectation, as Dr. Hill said. And yes, it is. When you talk about the pacing, we often talk about with teachers the whole idea of it's a debit and credit system almost. You have to monitor your pacing as you go because you may be able to teach some things faster than the pace that the district curriculum sets it at, and that gives you a credit, so to speak, whereas you may have to spend that extra time that you accrue later on in a unit or with a lesson that takes a little bit longer, where you have more students that don't get it the first time around and need additional instruction or assessment to help them get it. So as you said, the ultimate goal is where we have to be by the end of the year or by the critical assessment dates, if you will. And so we try to be as flexible and build in as much opportunity within our curriculum units for teachers to not just have to spend every minute of every class period every day in the direct instruction, but also to be able to have time to build in opportunities for students to relearn and reassess where it's necessary. And it is sometimes, honestly, it's a juggling act for the teacher in the classroom to have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. And I mean, I'll just say that I think everyone knows where my views are on assessments. We assess I look at all of these assessments that are listed here, and my only comment was we are over-assessing. We are just, as a state, we're just over-assessing our kids, and we're setting the bar here and saying this is where every child needs to be, and every child's just not going to be there. And so, you talk about the critical assessment date, and that's where we need everybody to be by that date, and every child's just not going to be there. So, and that's just a general statement that I really wish we could get more towards progress and growth for our students and helping them to make accomplishments and be successful that way. One of the suggestions I would make is that you talked about tutorials and utilizing tutorials, because one of the things I see, and I don't know how much this is happening across the district, but maybe some training for teachers. What I see a lot is that they're offering a lot of tutorials. I think we do that really well as a district, but I'm not a lot of times the teachers are there to answer questions instead of maybe addressing an issue that's going on with a student in a classroom. If they have a student that they know has just failed or not performed well on a test, maybe some more, helping teachers to focus on whatever the issues are going on with that student instead of just waiting for the student to ask. And that's just a little bit of what I've seen just in my experience, that students don't always know what to ask. Sometimes they're going to tutorials and they're going for help, and if teachers aren't providing it, they may not exactly know how to answer, ask the questions. So that's just a suggestion. I don't know if you guys provide anything around, tutoring or how to run tutorials for teachers, but that may be just something think about. My last question is around the differentiated instruction and providing those models maybe within the framework of our online curriculum. And I think I've asked this before, but do we specifically plan to offer suggested modifications, whether it's for special education students or students in GT, or do we expect our teachers to provide that themselves?
I'll answer that. As you know, we're undergoing a program review for GT right now, so they're starting to present their findings to us. So our goal this year was to take the existing curriculum and then embed strategies or tips and tools for differentiated instruction so that the teacher who has a heterogeneous class with students with GT eligibility or SPED eligibility or any type of student in their class could scroll down and see how to meet the needs of those profiles of students. We're not where we need to be, certainly, but the good news is we're sitting at the table with the directors of those departments contemplating the best ways to accomplish this. Eventually, that will be where it needs to be, but we're kind of waiting for the review to come in before we jump out there and start the work that may not be aligned with the recommendations of our program evaluation. I'm going to go back, also going along with differentiated instruction. When you talked about the pacing, that is a huge dilemma, especially in our secondary school settings because they are driven bell to bell. Elementary has a little bit more leeway to manipulate the time in their day, especially if they're self-contained, to go back and reteach a lesson or to pull students to the back table to embrace the small group instruction. But if we implement differentiated instruction well in this district, then our teachers will know how to manipulate and differentiate the process and the content and the product, and they'll be okay with grading students differently and using assessment data in a different way while still being accountable to the state and the TEKS objectives. Because we owe it to all students, whether they're learning disabled or impaired in any way or gifted and working above where they need to be, we have to follow the state standards, but we are not where we need to be when it comes to differentiating the process. We still walk into the classrooms and we see a lot of one-size-fits-all instruction. So that's a huge goal of ours because we agree with you. I validate all of your concerns that when you put that pacing out there, we don't want them to think, oh, I have X number of days and I'm going to just rush on through this and I'll leave the kids behind that didn't get it, or if there was an instructional gap. So that's on us to go in and catch this in the middle of the unit so we can redirect them and reinforce and support them, and to think of non-traditional ways within the instructional setting to close these instructional gaps and meet the needs of kids. Some students cannot come before school or after school for tutorials, so we're looking at ways to work with principals as they work on their master schedules to include this. We're looking at ways to help the secondary teachers to find time in that bell-to-bell period and let them know that it's okay not to stand in front and deliver via lecture modality. And by the metrics that we were using to monitor student engagement and rigor and questioning and student response, that gives us the data to have those conversations with teachers, and that makes them a little more receptive to embrace these strategies that we're talking about when it comes to differentiation. But we're absolutely not where we need to be. But what I do know, I just learned, is Dr. Francis Stetson, who's working with us in different ways, has a huge piece on differentiated instruction, and I have my hands on it now. So we're going to be using some of that data to inform our decisions going forward with professional development, so that we can ensure that our teachers are equipped to meet the needs of our learners.
Well, that's good, because you hit on a critical point that our teachers are feeling overburdened and pressured, and they don't have a lot of time to, they don't have a lot of time to differentiate it at all, but come up with the ideas sometimes that they need. I've said to you guys before, one of my primary concerns is that I feel like all of our educators are not properly trained, or perhaps just don't have the time or can't creatively come up with ways to do it on the spot. So training obviously is a big piece of it, but also I think embedding it in our written curriculum and having it online, where if they don't have time to create it themselves, which is a lot of what we're seeing, is that at least something is there for them to start with, give them something to start with. So I hear you saying it is our goal to have that within the...
That would be our long-range goal. Obviously, there are thousands and thousands of lessons in our curriculum across all kinds of content areas. And by getting out initially with some differentiated practices. In math, these are some good solid ways to both enrich and to remediate so that students at both ends are not left behind. Also, I think you know what my philosophy is on assessment, and I think we do and are required to do way too much of it, but I also think that a certain amount of assessment is good to drive instruction and tell us what kind of job are we doing, where do we need to improve. One of the things that when we talk about what gets counted becomes important is some of the College Board data that we get, for example, and we'll go over more of that next month, indicates that we have a lot of untapped potential out there. We have a lot of students who are capable of stepping up to the plate of taking more rigorous coursework, and we're not tapping that potential. And without that assessment, we wouldn't know that. On the flip side of that, the state has some accountability that we've shared in our community dialogue meetings, and we'll share later tonight and in more detail next month, that indicates at the other end of the spectrum, we have some students who are struggling and need to have greater access to the regular curriculum. So we realize we're not quite where we need to be. We have a lot of work left to be done, but we're committed to improvement. And I think that is the message that we want to leave you with tonight, is that we hear your charge. We understand managed curriculum. We take it seriously, and we ensure that the campuses take it seriously. And we're not finished.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thank you very much. The board needs to take a break. We've been very good sitting passively in our seats. I think that was one of the passive engagement, one of the monitoring. But we need to take a break. So we are going to, if with your permission, we will convene in closed session and have our consultation with our attorney and work on our personnel matters, and we will come back in a little while and hear the next part of your information item at some point tonight.
Okay.
Thank you very much.